talk. And I'm just going to share a little bit more about Reverend Maggie as I also press the record button here. Just give me a second.
This meeting is being recorded.
Excellent. So today, Reverend Maggie Alderman, coming to us from Florida, is going to be giving our talk. Just to share a little bit more about Reverend Maggie, she is a Unity Truth student and ordained minister. She's traded her Texan roots for a Floridian life in Orlando with her husband and adult children and fur babies. Formerly, she was the senior minister at Unity of Central Florida. She's now a minister at large, managing Summit Unity, teaching at Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute, and serving on the Unity Urban Ministerial School Board of Directors, while she also contributes to Unity Magazine as a published author regularly. A workshop facilitator and international speaker, Reverend Maggie champions diversity, inclusivity, and a fervent love for prayer. Her mission is clear: to boldly embody Christ consciousness with a loving audacity, granting others the liberty to claim their own divine expression. And I welcome Reverend Maggie.
Thank you, C. And thank you everybody for having me today. This is, it feels like I'm in the right place at the right time. Don't you just love that feeling when you know you've come into a space with the right people to see your soul's development brought forward? And I have evidence that you guys are a really great crowd because I have a prayer kitty and he doesn't like me any other time other than when I'm in prayer and meditation. And he was literally beating at the back door to come in and join us for this Sunday service. So congratulations on passing that test. So today's talk was Clear a Path. It evolved to be Clear a Path to a life worth living. And I say evolved because we in Unity are evolutionary beings, aren't we? We know that we are in a human experience, but this driver is our spiritual self. Our spiritual soul's growth is always at the helm to see our highest good brought forward. So I thought we were just going to clear a path, and then a life worth living came through for me as I was putting this talk together. And I thought, how appropriate now that we have come through one of our largest evolutionary cycles, that being the resurrection, that being that of Easter, where we don't necessarily buy into, though there is enough evidence that we know something miraculous happened. In Unity, we know that our soul has gone through a resurrection period, that we have been invited to the dark night of the soul through our winter season to evaluate, to rummage around, to see what may be just hanging out and needs to be released, to evaluate our thoughts and our beliefs and our patterns, to let go of something that once probably served us very, very well in a previous iteration. And now we've let it go. We have gone into that tomb. We have declared that we will be resurrected in a new spiritual expression. And I want to say that rebirth, that Easter season, it's nothing to sneeze at. It sounds easy on paper. Oh, just let a few things go. Oh, I claim my highest good. But if you're anything like me, that was an arduous process. There was a lot of work going on internally. And now here we are some 2 weeks later, where we get to step back, where we get to bear witness and express awe for how miraculous we truly are. And you might be in the reflection, this like, I'm proud of myself. I did good work. I put in the effort. Our co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore, talked about the efforting of evolution in a lot of her writings and most definitely in her prayer work. And we are now on the other side. We have efforted. So I want to invite you all to take a deep breath and just settle into the wonder of where who and how you are today. And let's now follow that thread of wonder, that thread of awareness, that thread of we are changed beings as we now get invited to step out of our inner world, step out in demonstration of who and what we are in our new form. Now, after Easter, I might need a minute. I might need a minute to kind of settle into my new skin. Yes, wow. Yes, all of the wonder and all of the efforting and all of the amazement, all of that is true. But this is about the time where my ego, my small mind starts to come alive and think, oh God, what have I done? This part of my inner being that is designed to protect me recognizes that we are now in a foreign territory, new thoughts, new patterns, new actions, new people, new places. You get it, right? It's all brand new. And our ego, our small mind, is most comfortable when it's in a place of prediction, when we know what is going to happen and we can guarantee that we will be safe. But the ego doesn't really have a place here. And that's our task in clearing a path, is to know when that small voice, that little voice, starts to chirp, and to stay firm in who we know we have been called to be in this time. So that ego, for me, wants to stay small. You know, here I am, big and shiny and new. And if I know new things and I'm stepping into the fullness of who I am, then my light has to be shining brighter. And if my light is shining brighter, then other people are going to notice. You know, if they notice what I'm doing, they might ask me about what I'm doing. And this new beat, this place where I need to just rest, just to assimilate, just to feel this newness that I am, isn't quite ready. But that doesn't mean that the world isn't going to come for me. That new phrase, I hear it often with my kids. They're all adults, but they say, people come for me, Mom, when I tell my truth, when I shine my light. And I wonder if you may or may not recognize when people have come for you in a new expression. So just breathe for a second and recognize that you have evolved. It is new, and you're shining a little brighter than you were just a couple of weeks ago. Whether you can see that or not, rest assured that we all see it, don't we? For your friends, for your church mates, for your spouses, there's something new afoot. When that comes up for me, and I know that I've been spotted, that ego starts to stir the question, can I do this? Am I worth it? Am I strong enough, tall enough? Do I have shoulders broad enough to bear the weight of what I know I've been called to do, whether that's giant or tiny? There is that inner dialogue. It's the place of deciding, do I want to go forward? Do I want to clear this path? Do I want to create a life that is worth living in alignment with truth, with principle, with our powers that was talked about at the top of the service? Or do I want to play small? Do I want to be safe? Do I want to most definitely guarantee that I will repeat the same process again and again until I stand in the conviction of my knowing that this too is for me, and that God may not have called me because I am equipped, but because I have been called, I will be equipped along the way. So as this rattled around and I was chewing over the lesson and recognizing the pattern of what was going on in the outer world and how it relates to us in our biology, this rebirth process. Have you ever had a book fall off the shelf and almost like smack you, right? So I was like, what am I going to talk on? How do I relate this? And I had a book that I had not read, but was on my shelf called the Nehemiah Code. It's the Nehemiah Code. It's never too late for a new beginning. This is by O.S. Hawkins. If it strikes your fancy, you can order it. And it turned out that Nehemiah was the perfect story. So we're going to take a deeper dive into this through the analogy that is painted in chapters 1 through 7. So if you don't know Nehemiah, and I wasn't all that familiar, I'll admit, Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king of Susa, S-U-S-A. And the king of Susa ruled at the Persian Empire. So this was years after the Babylonian War. And Nehemiah came to find out that there were Jews still seeking refuge elsewhere. He came to find out that through the war, and now some 100 years later, that Jerusalem and the wall around it that guaranteed its safety was still in disrepair. The city was vulnerable, and there were people that were attempting to dwell within the city, to do business within the city. But can you imagine, put yourself in that space where they were just extremely vulnerable? So talk about 1 or 2 or 3 steps forward and 10 back. There was no traction without security. And so when Nehemiah heard this story, it broke his heart to hear that the wall was still crumbling. And he sat and he cried for days over the angst, the pain, knowing that his own people were still suffering, wondering of how could this actually be true, that no one was called to repair the city. No one was called to provide security and see that the Jewish people were provided a clear path to their life worth living. So I wondered, when has that ever looked like for me? When have I ever heard news, I think we can all relate, and sat in heartbreak, in confusion, or in just wondering, what is mine to do? And I realized that that looks a whole lot like prayer for us. When we take a question into contemplation, we are actively praying. And so the days went by, and Nehemiah, as the cupbearer, was serving the king. And the king noticed that Nehemiah was a little melancholy, and this rose an alarm, because you can imagine that the guy that's tasked with pouring the king's wine, you want to see him happy, because if you're not happy, then there might be a little poison slipped into that goblet, right? So he asked him, Nehemiah, what is going on with you? And he said to the king, I have been called. I have been called to do this thing. He said, did you know that the city is in disrepair? Did you know that the wall has not been fixed, that they have no security, no traction to create a life worth living? And so I know that the gracious hand of God is upon me, and I need your help, you see. So he asked the king for letters to cross multiple territories. And the king said, sure, I'll guarantee your safe passage, and I'll do you one better. I'm going to give you not 2, not 3, but 5 officers to guard you, to see you to the destination that you've been called. So upon their arrival, I don't know about y'all, but I think about Jerusalem, and it seems like it has to be a tiny city. It's a huge city. Upon his arrival, Nehemiah quietly, without talking to anyone, this is key, without telling anyone his business, he surveyed the destruction. He surveyed what was this huge project that he was being called to take on, much like we are Much like when that little voice starts to say, are you enough here? Do you have enough? Are you smart enough? Strong enough? Do you have time enough to do the thing that you're called to do? And what I love is that Nehemiah just sat with his purpose. He didn't tell anyone until he was clear on those that would be invested in his success. So he started gathering people to see him be successful and asked if they wanted to contribute. These were the priests. This was landowners, perfumers, goldsmiths, their sons and their daughters. This was generational. This wasn't just, I need safety and security. I want safety and security for the people that I love best. And wouldn't you know that just as he said yes, and just as he had enough forces to see him be successful, that's when the adversaries showed up. So let's just pause here. This is where we are, friends, in the 2 weeks post-Easter. We've been called, we've evaluated, maybe wondered and questioned and doubted. But I'm looking here and there are 46 participants. So I know that each of you are a goldsmith, a landowner, a perfumer of that city. You're all here to uplift in a positive manner the truth that you've been called to express. So hold on to that nugget. So these adversaries show up. Adversaries may be the external. I can deal with them. They started heckling. They started jousting them and telling them this was a lost cause. They didn't have enough supplies, enough daylight, enough strength to be able to complete the task. Nehemiah was a fool to think he could do it. He tried to be called off that wall multiple times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and he would not be deterred from that which he was called to do. He said, we have a mind to work. So the work didn't stop. Their words didn't stop them. The attempted acts of violence didn't stop them. The slander didn't stop them. The distraction and attempted chaos didn't stop them. In Nehemiah 4:8, it says they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and cause confusion within it. Metaphysically, Jerusalem is the city of peace. So when we are achieving, striving to clear a path, to allow room for people to show up in their Godskin and affirm that we weren't crazy, that we are strong enough. We weren't hallucinating in that meditation. We were called into something greater that can only be expressed through us. We must stick into that we are creating a place of peace, where we are not in strife, where we are not giving mind to the ego. We're not giving mind to the adversaries calling us off the wall. But what about the adversaries between your 2 ears? Those are the adversaries that will repeat to you old truths of who you may have been once upon a time, but not who you claim to be today, you see. So in conclusion, a wall in a city that sat nearly 100 years in complete disarray, being the right person, trusting the right message, and having the right people that showed up in support of that, that wall was repaired in 52 days because all things are possible with God. So in this pause, think about that story of Nehemiah. Think about when you've been called and where you're exercising your energy of evolution. Can you see yourself on the wall with the people doing the work, affirming one another? Or perhaps you're an adversary. No shame. We've all played both sides of that game, most definitely. But when you set out to fulfill your soul's calling, we must be prepared to clear that path, and not only clear it, but act on it through our highest thought. So in unity, principle number 2 says that we are inherently good, and principle 3 says that we have the power to create the experience of our reality. That adversary between our 2 ears has the ability to deter us, to invite us to play small. And our task is to eliminate those old thoughts, clearing a path for a new groove to be played in truth, expressing as we are, as we understand in this day. So what adversaries do you experience? I have some within my very own family. I have some that will remind me of a time I embarrassed myself when I was in the 3rd grade, and that adversary would keep me small, quiet, safe, humble. Do you experience these adversaries, and are you aware of them? Because being aware is more than half the battle. Adversaries show up for us because the status quo has been disrupted. I'm going to say that again. The adversary, whether they are external or internal, always show up when the status quo has been disrupted. And in this case, you're the disruptor. Your energy is influencing a change within them, and they may not have words to articulate that, but you're shining brighter. You're saying yes to what you're called to do. And if you can do it, maybe I can do it. So in a world that is filled with influencers all over social media, all over television, all over printed news, in a world filled with influencers, when that energy is disrupted, that status quo, question for yourself, what type of influencer am I going to be? Am I going to be an influencer that shines unabashedly bright, that lives my truth and demonstrates highest thoughts and is divinely influenced and is following my calling, even though I may not know all of the answers and all of the steps and all of the how? Do you think Nehemiah did? He was just called. He was just shown a way, and the path was cleared. Or will you be an adversary? Will you stay in a lower vibration that no longer serves you? Will you allow ego-driven comments to fall out of your mouth before you gain control, dominion over your thoughts? Will you be competitive? No, I can do that better. No, I tried to build that wall. It was useless, Nehemiah. You're a fool. Go home. Will you allow yourself to be stuck and settle for something that you know in your heart of hearts you have truly outgrown? I have a great example that has stuck with me for probably 25 years, where when I was a much younger woman, I worked with a gal who was about my age. Her name was Elizabeth. And we worked for a government contractor that wasn't a particularly wonderful man that owned the business. We weren't paid particularly well. We didn't get holiday bonuses. He was really stingy with time off. But it was a long time ago. And I was grateful for the opportunity to grow my skills when I was in my 20s, to grow my organization and my administrative skills. And I became a research analyst. But Elizabeth wasn't as happy and content. And one day she went to my boss and said that She had applied for another job and gotten it and getting a big old chunk of a raise and leaving in 2 weeks. And my boss, Jennifer, begged her, please don't tell anybody. Don't tell them. Because she knew that she was disrupting the status quo. And Elizabeth created a domino effect within the team. She knew that she could do more. She knew she was called to be bigger, shine brighter, to be that demonstration, a divine influencer in the outer world. And she disrupted my status quo. I had settled, gotten comfortable, made excuses for a crappy boss, but I wasn't fulfilled. My needs weren't being met, and I was being underutilized. So Elizabeth was my influencer. She gave her 2 weeks notice. I sat with the discomfort of the truth that I had become complacent in my own life. I got busy clearing a path to a life worth living for me at that time. And sure enough, I resigned and I started a progression from there that has led me to here with you all today. So are there some thoughts that are hanging on with you, some pre-Easter thoughts that are still riding along, keeping you comfortable and telling you lies that you are only this big, you are only this strong, you are only this capable? For us to shed that, for us to clear a path and really embrace a life that is worth living, we have the opportunity to release that swirl of behavior, that thought pattern, that wondering if we can, should, could, would. But it takes us settling in and becoming comfortable with some F words. Not those F words, you all, but some other F words. And those F words are faith, fulfillment, and freedom. So faith, let's start there. Faith is the power to bring the invisible into the visible. Faith is the action of God directing us through intuition, through meditation, through our dream work, through who knows, a million unlimited ways where we get called, pushed, pulled into a new evolutionary experience. Faith steps forward and says, let me lead you. Without knowing how this ends, let me lead you, and you be willing to be led. Know that what you don't have will be provided. What you don't know, you will learn. And those who are for you will show up in just the right time. I remind you and myself that Matthew 19:26 says, all things are possible with God. So this is faith for us to know that the possible is being made manifest. And our task, our tool in this area is to find the champions for us, to seek our people, to seek our community that will not echo those low thoughts, but shout from the mountaintop. They're our hype girls, our hype guys. Yes, you can. Go, girl, go. Don't you quit. I'm going to help you. Those that are here for us. Our second F word is fulfillment. Fulfillment is defined as bringing forth, to draw out what we are called here to be, and we put it in action. Knowing and not doing, hear me, knowing and not doing is a sure plan for misery. So while you're figuring it out, allow faith to lead so that you may be fulfilled. And when you're in doubt, ask yourself, what is the alternative? If it's not this thing that I'm going to do, what will it be? And I have the answer. What is for you is always for you. You cannot avoid it. And I have been smacked in the forehead with that metaphysical 2x4 enough times to know that when I feel called, through faith, I go and I will be fulfilled. And the last F is freedom. To hold on to the truth of our knowing through the God of our individual understanding. We are not all the same, and that's okay. But you are in the process of working with and through the God of your understanding, and we set ourselves free from those who would judge us harshly. Those who would be our naysayers against taking action toward our fulfillment, toward strengthening our faith, including ourselves. Including ourselves. Clearing a path to a life worth living, we may need to gain dominion over our old patterns and behaviors. And this drops us off at the corner of our fifth principle, where we get to take this out, living it out loud on the street for all to see. So what do we do when this rises up? When those adversaries, when those negative thoughts, the low vibration shows itself? Our tools are canceling those old thoughts. Cancel old friends. My daughter introduced me to a term frenemy, a friend turned enemy, someone who is no longer for me. Cancel. Denials. They have no power to create the future of your life worth living. And where we apply a denial, we plant an affirmation. So I'm going to take us through those questions one more time. Am I worth it? Can I do this? Am I strong enough? And the affirmation is, of course I am. Can I do it? Of course I can. Am I strong enough? Of course I am. Do I have what I need? Of course I do. Right here and right now. How do I know? Because I was called. Because God has put a calling on my heart and my mind to do something new, to repair something broken, to express in a new way when we are living, friends, where new expression is desperately needed in unity around our world. Wouldn't you agree? So say it with me. I am worthy. I live a worthy life. I am worth it. When those doubts, when those adversaries show up, remember these tools: deny, affirm, and act. This is the formula to clearing a path, releasing old thoughts, releasing old energy, and creating for us a life worth living. And in that, we are demonstrating how others may be creating a life worth living in peace with you. And that's the truth. And so it is. And so let's take this into meditation. I want to invite you all to take a deep breath, to settle into the space, to feel the fullness of the support of the chair or the floor or the couch that you rest upon. Breathe deeply and release through the exhale all of the activity that is serving as a distraction. All of the activity that swirls in our mind and creates in its wake confusion, murkiness, cloudiness. And let us come into this time of meditation with the expectation of clarity, the expectation that we are clearing a path to a life that is worth living joyfully and fully fulfilled. So from head to toe, do a body scan and look for where you may be harboring low vibrational energy, a low level thought, anything that is not in alignment with your highest good, with the truth of your creation. We let it go easily, gracefully. Where there is a void, an emptiness created with that release, let us invite an affirmation of truth. I am strong enough. I am brave enough. I am the activity of faith in action. So I invite you to sit in this place, this indwelling space of peace, to plug in and connect fully with the divine essence that moves and has its being expressing exactly as you are. And accept the truth that you are divine. Would you challenge the face of God to say it is not strong enough? Would you challenge the face of God to say it is not big enough, bold enough, brave enough to move through its divine expression, its calling to bring forth a greater good for all of its inhabitants on this planet? And I would offer you this. If you would not say that to the face of God or anyone in this space that you love, cherish, and appreciate, then let us release the temptation to turn those weapons on ourselves. We are a miraculous, evolutionary, faith-filled expression. We can do whatever we have been called to do. We can be whatever we are called to be. Together we clear this path and step more boldly and firmly into a life worth living. And we are grateful. We are grateful for our experience and the ability to demonstrate truth for all of those who are bearing witness to our process. Allowing this to serve the greater good, we release these words to do their good and perfect work, and know that as we give, so do we receive anything and everything we need all the time. And so it is. Amen.